Hello, my name's Emma Wilder. Welcome to this short video on trustees and their legal duties. So what's the video about? Well, we'll learn what are the legal duties of a charity trustee, we'll talk a bit about the Charity Governance Code, and we'll also explore the Nolan Principles. By the end of this session, hopefully you'll have an overview of the trustee role and the legal duties of trustees and understand the difference between the roles of trustees and that of management. So let's start with the legal duties of trustees. Here you can see 10 legal duties, but which of these 6 are the official duties of trustees? I'll give you a few minutes just to think about it. Have you thought about it? Well, here we go. So, as you can see, the 6 legal duties of trustees are ensuring that the charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit, complying with the charity's governing document and the law, acting in the best interests of the charity, managing the charity's resources responsibly, acting with reasonable care and skills, and ensuring that the charity is accountable. So how do trustees do this? Well, trustees have the overall control of a charity and they're responsible for making sure that it's set up and doing what it's supposed to do. Trustees can also be known as other titles such as directors, board members, governors, or committee members. One of the key trustee legal duties is ensuring that your charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit. How do you do this? Well, you need to ensure that you understand your charity's purpose or charitable object as set out in its governing document. You'll also plan what your charity will do and what you want to achieve in pursuant of this charitable object. You need to be able to explain how your charity's activities are intended to support its charitable object. And you need to understand how the charity benefits the public by carrying out its purposes. So what should trustees do? Well, make sure that you have a copy of your charity's government document and that you've read it and you understand it. You may also have a strategy document. A lot of the ways you'll demonstrate this is also through your trustees' annual report, but also through any advocacy you do. The next legal duties of trustees is to make sure you comply with your charity's governing document and the law. Again, this is why it's key for you to read your charity's governing document and understand it. You need to take reasonable steps to find out the legal requirements, for example, by reading the relevant guidance or taking appropriate advice when you need to. The Charity Commission has lots of guidance on its website, as well as other bodies having relevant guidance. Registered charities must also keep their details on the register up to date. So this means that you need to submit your trustee's annual report and accounts on time. If a trustee resigns, you should update the Charity Commission using your online Charity Commission account. And the same if you get a new trustee, you should update the Charity Commission straight away using your online Charity Commission account. You also need to act in the best interests of the charity. What does this mean? Well, only you and your co-trustees must decide how the charity will carry out its purpose. You and your fellow trustees must make balanced and adequately informed decisions, thinking about the long term as well as the short term. You also need to avoid putting yourself in a position where your duty to the charity conflicts with your personal interests or loyalty to any other person or body. That's why having a conflict of interest policy and trustees declaring any interest or conflict of loyalties at the start of the meeting is really important. You also should not receive any benefit from the charity unless it's been properly authorised and is clearly in the charity's interests. This also includes anyone who is financially connected with you, such as a partner, dependent child, or business partner. So how can you demonstrate this? Well, again, as long as you have thorough trustee minutes, you have a conflict of interest policy, you also have your trustees declaring any conflicts of interest, both on an annual basis and at the start of the meeting, so it's captured in the minutes. As a trustee, you also need to manage your charity's resources responsibly. So you need to make sure that the charity assets are only used to support or carry out its purpose, not take any inappropriate risk with the charity's assets or its reputation, not to overcommit the charity, and take special care when investing or borrowing. Also, making sure that you comply with any restrictions on spending funds. So you and your fellow trustees should put appropriate procedures and safeguards in place to take reasonable steps to ensure that these are followed. Otherwise, you risk making the charity vulnerable to theft or other kinds of abuse and being in breach of your trustee duties. You must also act with reasonable care and skill. You must act with reasonable care and skill, making use of your skills and experience and taking appropriate advice where necessary. You should give enough time, thought, and energy to your role. For example, preparing for, attending, and actively participating in all trustee meetings. You also need to ensure that your charity is accountable. You need to demonstrate that your charity is complying with the law, is well run and effective. You need to ensure appropriate accountability to members if your charity has a separate membership from the trustees. And also ensure accountability within the charity, particularly where you delegate responsibility for particular tasks or decisions to staff or volunteers or subcommittees. So how is this done? Well, it's done through your annual report and accounts. If you're required to have an AGM, it's through your AGM. It's also done through reporting to key stakeholders, for example, funders and beneficiaries. When you're delegating, you can delegate some decision making, but you cannot delegate the overall responsibility. And trustees always remain collectively responsible for all decisions that are made and actions that are taken with their authority. You and your fellow trustees should set out in writing the limits on any delegated authority. You should put clear reporting procedures in place so you can ensure that delegated authority is exercised properly. For example, having schemes of delegation, committee terms of reference, etc. Part of your role as a trustee is to hold people, including staff, volunteers and fellow trustees, to account for how they carry out their role or use charity resources. This can mean asking probing or challenging questions about information at trustee meetings, or being prepared to say, "I do not understand what this means." You should receive timely information in a format that you can understand and use, and if necessary, ask for explanations, training, or a different presentation. A good example of this is all trustees, not just the treasurer or a trustee with finance or accounting knowledge, are responsible for the charity's finances and should be able to understand and consider and comment on any financial information. The Charity Governance Code. The Charity Governance Code is not a legal or regulatory requirement at present. It draws upon, but is fundamentally different to the Charity Commission's guidance, and it sets out the principles and recommended practice for good governance and is deliberately aspirational. Some elements of the code will be a stretch for many charities to achieve. A charity is best placed to achieve its ambitions and aims if it has effective governance and the right leadership structures. It is the aim of the code to help charities and their trustees develop these high standards of governance. There are currently two versions of the code, one for large charities, generally with income over £1 million, and one for smaller charities whose income is below this level. The aim of the Charity Code is to comply or explain. You can also download a Word document which allows you to compile evidence of having met the different aspects of this code and an action plan for improvement. So what is the Charity Governance Code? Well, it's based on 7 key pillars: the organisational purpose and the foundation. The organisational purpose: the board is clear about what the charity's aims are and ensures that these are being delivered effectively and sustainably. Leadership: every charity is led by an effective board that provides strategic leadership in line with the charity's aims and values. Integrity: the board acts with integrity, adopting values and creating a culture which help achieve the organisation's charitable purpose. The board is aware of the importance of the public's confidence and trust in charities, and trustees undertake their duties accordingly. Decision-making, risk and control: the board makes sure that its decision-making processes are informed, rigorous and timely, and that effective delegation, control and risk assessment management systems are set up and monitored. Board effectiveness: the board works as an effective team, using the appropriate balance of skills, experience, backgrounds and knowledge to make informed decisions. Equality, diversity and inclusion: the board's approach to diversity supports its effectiveness, leadership and decision-making. Openness and accountability: the board leads the organisation in being transparent and accountable. The charity is open in its work unless there is good reason not to be. So let's examine each of these in slightly more detail. So organisational purpose: the emphasis of this is on the board core role being the focus of strategy, performance and assurance. Leadership: an emphasis here is on collective responsibility, so not relying on one trustee for information or decision-making purposes. For example, the finance experts are all deferring to the chair's views. Integrity: this is about ensuring the charity's purposes are delivered for the public benefit and are at the heart of what the board does. It links really closely with the conflict of interest that we were talking about earlier in the presentation. Decision-making, risk and control: the board is ultimately responsible for the decisions and actions of the charity, but it cannot and should not do everything. So this is around delegation of action, but not necessarily responsibility. For example, senior managers prepare an annual budget which the trustees approve, and then trustees monitor against this. Having a risk management framework: deciding what your risk appetite is as a board. As a board, not individually. So are you risk averse? Are you risk neutral? Are you risk takers? It also helps to have a delegation framework so that managers and others working in the charity know the limits of their authority and when decisions need to be taken by the board. Equality, diversity and inclusion: it's important that you have an equality, diversity and inclusion policy. It's also really important that the board represents the communities that they serve. So how do you do this? Well, it's great to have that mix of skills and experience on the board, but rather than saying, I need an accountant, I need a lawyer, I need a this, I need a that, think about what your charity's purpose is. What are you there to do? Who are the communities that you serve? Is there a way that your board can get somebody from the communities you serve onto the trustee board so things can be bottom up as well as top down? How do you do this? Trustee recruitment should be open rather than people suggesting who they know. You should also undertake a board skill to identify any gaps that you may have. How do you target these gaps? Openness and accountability. So how are you open and accountable? Well, the trustees' annual report and accounts should reflect the reality of the situation that your charity finds itself in. They can also include, for example, case studies, pictures, infographics, more than just the legal requirements. This helps to make your Trustees Annual Report and account a marketing document as well. You're also accountable to the Charity Commission. So remember that you need to file your Trustees Annual Report and accounts with the Charity Commission 10 months after your financial year end date. And if your income is over 25,000, you also need an independent examination. If your income's over 250,000 and you've got assets of over 3.26 million, you require an audit. You will also require an audit if your income is over £1 million. The code starting point is that all trustees are committed to their charity's cause and have joined the board because they want to help the charity deliver its purpose most effectively for the public benefit. Trustees need to understand their roles and legal duties, and in particular have read the Charity Commission's guidance, CC3, the Essential Trustee, have read their charity's governing document and understand it. The Nolan Principles. The Nolan Principles, also known as the 7 Principles of Public Life, apply to anyone who works as a public office holder. This includes all those who are elected or appointed to public office, nationally and locally, and all people appointed to work in the civil service, local government, the police, courts, and probation services, non-departmental governing public bodies, and in health, education, social and care services. The principles also apply to all those in other sectors delivering public services. So they may not apply to all charities, but a lot of charities do adopt these as they're a really good set of principles. They were first set out in 1995 and there's some ethical standards. So what are they? They are selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. Now, you may see some similarity here with the Charity Governance Code, and it's true there definitely are some overlaps. So selflessness. This is around holders of public office acting solely in the terms of the public interest, and this links to trustee legal duties in that trustees should only act in the interest of that charity as they're sat at the time. Integrity. Holders of public office must avoid placing themselves under any obligation to people or organisations that might try inappropriately to influence them in their work. They should not act or take decisions in order to gain financial or other material benefits for themselves, their family, or their friends. They must declare and resolve any interests and relate. So again, you can see how this links to having a conflict of interest policy and acting in the charity's best interests. Objectivity. Holders of public office must act and take decisions impartially, fairly, and on merit, using the best evidence and without a discrimination or bias. So this links to trustees acting with reasonable care and skill, and again acting in the charity's best interests. Accountability. Holders of public office are accountable to the public for their decisions and actions and must submit themselves to scrutiny necessary to ensure this. So again, when you submit your trustees annual report and your accounts, these are publicly available documents. Openness. Holders of public office should act and take decisions in an open and transparent manner. Information should not be withheld from the public unless there are clear and lawful reasons for doing so. So again, this links to the conflict of interest policy that we talked about before and trustees acting in the charity's best interests. Honesty. This goes without saying, but holders of public office should be truthful, open and honest. The same as trustees of charities. Leadership. Holders of public office should exhibit these principles in their own behaviour and treat others with respect. They should actively promote and robustly support the principles and challenge poor behaviour when it occurs. So again, this links to leadership within charities. You should be living your charity's values and your behaviour should reflect your charity's values. So how are they all interlinked? Well, here's a little table that shows you how we see them all being interlinked. Thank you for listening today. If you have any questions or queries, here are our details.